Let us define what is a social support and who is your social support. A social support system is a group of people that you can turn to for either emotional support or maybe a practical support. Practical meaning like a problem-solving issue. Many times, a family support or social support includes family, friends, peers. I want you to take a minute, just for a minute, think about who is part of your support system. Do you have one? And who is it that's part of that support group? And if you don't have one yet, who would you like to consider to be part of that group? That's extremely important. A support system for people living with chronic illnesses have been shown to help us overcome unusually high levels of stress, especially when it comes to like a chronic condition or chronic disease. When you first get diagnosed with a chronic illness, there's a lot of unknowns about it. You see a lot of things on Google, you see a lot of things on platforms, on maybe on blogs, or maybe other people's experience, or perhaps you don't know anything about the condition. And that just heightens the level of stress because you're not sure as to what to expect. So having someone that you can turn to and just either vent and talk to, or perhaps get some suggestions or advice, really does help to reduce the level of stress that one experiences at that time. It's also been shown to improve resiliency. So the fact that although you feel down about a new diagnosis, it helps you to pick you back up right away, sooner than later. It also helps to boost your sense of security, meaning that you feel more comfort at home. You feel more comfort with the persons that you're experiencing this with, that you're sharing this with. Maybe you feel like you can't share it with everyone, or you're not sure with whom you want to share it with at that time. But having that at least one other or two other people that you can talk to and say, this is my condition, this is how I'm feeling, has really helped people manage a new diagnosis. And then, of course, a lot of times what I hear from many of my patients is improve their adherence to the treatment. So let's say I recommend a treatment to a patient. Sometimes they may not be as inclined to start the treatment. Maybe they're still second guessing. They're being unsure about the treatment. Maybe they're not sure about the side effects, if they'll tolerate it or not. And maybe once they get started, they're still unsure. And there's a lot of doubt, perhaps, regarding the condition. Maybe you haven't assimilated, or you haven't really understood that this is what's happening to me. And I had one particular patient recently who I recommended treatment about 6 months prior, and she admitted to me when I saw her 6 months later, even though I saw her in between, that she really didn't start her treatment because she wasn't sure that she had the condition. So it takes time for people to assimilate, and everyone is different. You can't expect everyone to be 100% all the time. And this is where family support comes in, because if you can chat with your friends and family, or whomever you decide your support system is, they can help you really understand what is happening, maybe share that burden with you. So, bringing comfort, lowering stress, helping you find solutions. Maybe if you're not sure about something, they might encourage you, hey, reach out to your healthcare provider, or maybe reach out to the National MS Society Navigator and speak to someone there who's more well-versed in the topic of MS, perhaps the treatment, and can help answer these questions for you. Next slide. Y la familia. So we're talking about the Hispanic, Latinx culture. So obviously family is extremely important. It's important. It's often a source of support and comfort, probably more family than, and we call friends family, sometimes depending on how long you've known them, but more of like close friends, best friends, part of the family. It's often in English referred to familism or familismo, depending where you're coming from. So it depends on maybe what country, what region you're coming from, that you may have that value. It's a cultural foundation. It brings a sense of strong value, helps you get connected with family members, usually immediate family members, not so much the extended all the time, but the ones that are really close to you, whether it be a partner, your children, your parents, your aunt, your uncle. I have a lot of patients who come with their grandma, with their aunt and uncle, and they're all connected. And it's an attachment that you have to your family. The value also brings with it a sense of dedication, like commitment and loyalty to your family. Like you want to make sure that your family is taken care of, that all the things that you need to accomplish within the group, within the collective support system, within the family system, wherever you are at. So it could be that you're living in a one generation home where it's just you, but many times, and depending on where you're coming from, there are homes that have 2 or 3 generations in the home. They have the grandmother, they have the parents, or, let's say, for example, me, my mother, and then my child. So you have 3 generations in one household, and that can be very common in some of the countries. And actually, you don't necessarily push away the family until they get a lot older. You kind of encourage them to stay with you. So That's something that is also unique to the Hispanic culture. Seeking advice from family members for important decisions. Till this day, I still ask my mom many questions all the time. Whether or not I may take all of the comments and suggestions to play, that's a different story. But I always get suggestions from elderly. I would say someone that's older, that's more wise. And my support system is not necessarily just my immediate family, but there are people at work that I rely on and I ask questions to who are more wise, than maybe they've had more experiences. And this is part of that same value, that same culture, that same connectedness that you have, the sense of loyalty. And unfortunately and fortunately, sometimes often prioritizing their needs before yours. And that could be a double-edged sword in the sense that, yes, you obviously, and I feel the same, where you want to make sure that your family's taken care of before you're taken care of. But when it comes to a chronic condition, when you're first diagnosed, it could be very overwhelming. In fact, it's many times very overwhelming. And especially when you don't have a medical background, perhaps, where you don't have a sense of what is what are they talking about? Why do I have to do an MRI? Why do I need labs? Why do I potentially need a lumbar puncture? Why do I need to be treated? Why do I need to be on treatment? Why do I need to be on treatment for so long? There's a lot of questions. Can I stop my treatment? And when do I need to switch? These are all very valid questions and things that probably run through your mind. Maybe not the first visit because it's overwhelming, but the subsequent visits, or maybe when you go home. And so having someone as a sounding board to talk to and having that support and with your immediate family when you go home, people that you see, is often very important. And everyone usually wants to help, right? As a Hispanic family, you may get more comments and more suggestions than you maybe want. And they always want to try to help. They always want to give their suggestions. And maybe they do it more of a positive approach rather than a negative approach, and not trying to overwhelm you, but it could be a little overwhelming. So we're going to talk about some strategies to overcome that later, but I just want to put that out there because that's something that patients have shared with me. And obviously they want to provide comfort, they provide support. And again, sometimes you just need to prioritize yourself. So those are some of the things that we experience as part of, the collective Hispanic culture or Latinx culture. Many times, again, it just depends where you're coming from. Maybe you're born here in the United States, and some of the cultural values may have changed, and that's okay. Latin culture or Latinx culture, Hispanic culture is not just one culture. It's a mix because it all depends where you're coming from, how you were raised, what's around you, and it's evolving. It's ever evolving, and it's going to continue to evolve depending where you're at. Next slide. So research shows that family do not really see themselves as caregivers, interestingly enough, and they see themselves as health supporters. And I find that interesting because I've done other programs with the National MSSI in the past in Spanish, where I did see that. I felt that way, where patients and their family members or their loved ones were present, and their loved ones were saying that I'm not a caregiver. I'm their partner, I'm their mom, I'm their aunt, I'm their child, but I want to support them on their journey throughout this condition. So this could be parents, it could be spouses or partners, siblings, maybe your brother, your aunt, your brother or your sister, relatives, aunts or uncles. Again, I can think of 2 or 3 patients where they always come in with their aunts. It just depends on who's around. Perhaps maybe that person has more of a know-how. They experienced the insurance process before. Maybe they experienced the medical field before, and they can kind of give you more advice. And that's why you chose them to be part of this journey. Could be friends. I have patients that come in with best friends. Some patients actually come in with their adult children. As you get older, right? As you get older, you rely on that immediate family, and that immediate family is no longer a small child, but an adult child. And that adult child can actually help advocate for that person. And that person, I have one person in mind who would tell me everything is perfect, everything is okay. But when her son came in, it was a whole different story. It was like, no, she's falling. No, this and that is happening. And it was an interesting dynamic to see. And obviously we want to do what we can to help. So again, they do want to help more, is what research has shown, that they feel like they want to help more often. But unfortunately, they lack the information on how to help. Maybe they weren't able to be present during your visit when you were diagnosed, or even the subsequent visit, and they don't know how to help. And then there are some that felt that they were just worried because they were too involved. So maybe that could be another concern as well. So, keep those things in mind. And again, in the past, I've heard supporters really say that they felt unheard, sometimes unseen, and unfortunately unappreciated, which again, we're going to talk about some of the strategies to kind of help incorporate and strengthen that family and social support. Next slide. So I put this slide up because I think that it'd be interesting later on, not necessarily now, but later on for you guys to share with us. Is there anything holding you back? If you don't have a social support system, or maybe you have a very limited social support system and you haven't had the opportunity to share with someone else, because again, telling other people about your diagnosis can be scary. What is it that worries you when you're disclosing your diagnosis to someone? What is it that obviously, if you feel comfortable to share, but it would be nice to know if you can share with others, maybe they're in the same situation, how you felt when you shared your diagnosis, perhaps with your parents, maybe someone at work, maybe your partner. I have one patient who didn't tell her mom, and she's an adult, obviously. And she said that she didn't tell her mom. Her mom passed away, and she didn't tell her mom because she didn't want to stress her mom, and her mom wasn't feeling well. She was ill. And so she decided to keep her diagnosis, which was over 10 years, to herself because she didn't want to stress her mom. And she was Hispanic. And so even though she interacted with her mom on a daily basis, it wasn't something that she just felt comfortable to do. And I have one who, her child, where she takes her medications and her child sees the medication, but she doesn't feel comfortable talking to her child about it. And she's asked me about it. And again, we're going to talk about strategies, but I counseled her and I gave her suggestions and advice on how to have that conversation. Does stigma of MS play a role in you wanting to disclose your diagnosis? Because stigma has been shown to lead to feelings of being judged, ignored, maybe feeling insignificant, perhaps depending on what role you play in your household. It may make you feel like I'm now insignificant. I can't contribute as much as I could initially. Leading to depression, poor quality of life, negatively impact to social relationships. Maybe you're feeling down and you don't feel like you want to converse, or maybe go out, have lunch or dinner, or go to the mall with your friends and family because maybe one of them knows and you don't want them to see you taking rest breaks, right? Or eyeing the bathroom, where you have to run to the bathroom and you have to tell everyone, hey, wait for me and I have to go to the restroom, and you don't want to have that experience, or even negatively impact work performance. So there has been loss of productivity at work due to diagnosis, sometimes leading to the fact that you don't feel comfortable disclosing your condition to your employer, which, depending on which state you're in, varies. Laws vary, but not disclosing to your coworkers or your employer sometimes can lead to negative work performance, loss of performance, because you don't want to ask for help. Maybe there's something that could be done at your workplace that will help improve your environment, but you're concerned about doing so because you don't want to tell them that you have a condition. And those are all things that patients have shared with us, shared with me. Maybe you've had a negative experience, when disclosing your condition to someone. Perhaps now with social media, not so much, since, it's widely known and a lot of celebrities have been diagnosed with MS, and there's more awareness around the diagnosis of MS. But there are some times where people come in, they're like, I have no idea what this is. Their family comes in, I've never heard of it before. And then there's others that when they come in, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard it. My cousin has it, or, so-and-so has it. And it kind of helps. And those are all things that I want you to think about. Also, a less common, although less common in men get diagnosed with MS too. And particularly when it comes to being Hispanic, depending on where your household and your beliefs, it could change dramatically. So there are some where the traditional role of a man is being the man of the house, and you're supposed to take care of A, B, C, and perhaps because of the condition, you're not able to take care of A, B, or C, or in some cases, unfortunately, after some time, 2 or 3 of them. And now you've had to adjust the role, and adjusting that role brings an entire different dynamic, stress level, maybe perhaps feeling again insignificant or insecure, being unhappy. And those are all topics of importance to discuss with someone, because the chronic condition doesn't just affect you, it does affect the family. So thinking of that, what else is holding you back? Is it that you also want to keep up appearances? Because on the outside, everything looks quote unquote normal, but you do have the condition and you do have a diagnosis of MS, and you just don't feel comfortable sharing with everyone. You want to keep that facade, not necessarily a facade, I think that's the wrong word choice, but keep that appearance, that everything is okay, and therefore you feel everything is okay, and you don't think about the condition until you either see the provider or you have your treatment. Next slide. So some of the strategies, this is not an all-inclusive slide, so there are many more that come out, but some of the strategies that you can use to strengthen your family support. The first two bullets are ones I strongly advocate for, obviously, because I am in the healthcare field and I interact with you on a daily basis. First, speaking to your healthcare provider about the challenges. You'd be surprised how often patients would come in and tell you that they're having hiccups at home or challenges at home, maybe communication problems, and because they feel a certain way and their family sees it a different way. And so their family doesn't understand, or if the patient says that the family doesn't understand how they're feeling. And so this is a great opportunity. With the COVID pandemic, as you saw in my picture, I didn't have a beard. I didn't have the opportunity to get a haircut. But with the pandemic, virtual platform Zoom particularly has expanded and evolved tremendously, where now you can actually use it to your advantage. Ask your healthcare provider, hey, can I see you by video so I can include my partner, so I can include my adult child, so I can include my aunt, so I can include my mom. And they don't have to be next to you. They can actually be on a different computer somewhere else, and they have the access to the link, and all they have to do is log in. But giving that opportunity to have them hear firsthand from someone that's a specialist or an expert in the field, give you the information that you need and how this may affect or cause any limitations firsthand, may help them see things differently and may help you cope better with the condition, and also speaking to your healthcare, speaking to your social support, having that interaction with them is what I mean. Consider seeing a specialist that can help facilitate the conversation. So I'm no child expert. And so when that person was telling me, oh, my child is an adolescent and is asking questions about why am I taking medicines and I'm not sure if I want to talk to them about the condition, I gave her my suggestions and my advice as an adult. And then I told her, listen, I think that the best approach would be that you speak to a licensed mental health provider, whether it be a psychologist, a counselor, or a social worker, and bring this up to them. Because sometimes you need someone that's unbiased, and therefore they don't know you like we do. And I'm always going to support my patients. So they don't know you. They can't say, oh, the patient this, and support you. And then your family's like, well, they're your provider. Of course, they're going to say that you're right. That's not going to be the conversation that you're going to have with the mental health provider, but they can help facilitate that conversation and tell you when is the appropriate time. Perhaps what are the terms that you should be using, particularly when you're talking to a child, perhaps, or maybe a partner, or maybe you're dating and you're dating with someone and this is getting very serious and you want to bring up the diagnosis of MS, but you don't want to. And the National MS Society has great resources on this, actually, which they can share with you. But this is getting very serious and you want to bring this up in conversation, because if you're going to get serious with this person, they need to know, right? They're going to see you taking medicine. They're going to see times that you don't feel so well, or times that you can't go out because you don't have the energy, you're fatigued. So having someone that can help you navigate that situation would be ideal, and they have the tools and resources to do so. Whereas the neurologist, obviously, you're going to, or the advanced care provider, which is me, a nurse practitioner, we can help you have that conversation with an adult and help provide the facts and the information and how you're feeling. But if you're not sure and you're wanting to be more sensitive about the topic, perhaps seeing someone that has that expertise would help facilitate that conversation. Obviously, if you have someone that's already part of your support system, showing your appreciation. Again, that other programs that I've done, both in English and in Spanish, the partners have said that they felt that perhaps they weren't as appreciated. They felt that when they tried to help, they were shut down. Maybe the patient wasn't feeling so well, the person wasn't feeling so well, and they're like, no, I don't want to talk, or I don't have the energy to do something. And that is misconstrued as like, I have a negative attitude towards you. So maintaining open communication and telling them that you appreciate them, and again, saying, I love you, or thank you for helping me, something like that can help strengthen that support system. And setting limits and boundaries as needed. So those two sort of go hand in hand. So one strategy that I told them at that time was, perhaps when the person has MS, is not feeling so well, and the partner wants to ask them a question or wants to go out, they should have like a word that they can use, or a word that they can say, maybe elephant, maybe a color, I don't know, something that between the patient and the significant other or the loved one, they both understand that this is a time that you're not feeling so well, that you just want to be left alone, and you don't have to necessarily say, I want to be left alone or I want to rest. So having that as a option and talking about it ahead of time, like, Jeffrey, when I say the word elephant, that means I just want to rest in bed. I'm very fatigued, or I'm not feeling so well, and I'll let you know when I need something. And that helps maintain the open communication. It helps you keep things fresh. It also helps you keep things respectful. And that's extremely important when you're talking to your social support, because again, as the research has showed, they're not looking at themselves as caregivers where they need to do this. They actually want to do this. They want to support you throughout your journey. And this is important because you don't want to turn them away and then create a negative environment where on top of the fact that you're not feeling so well, and now you're upset, and now you're feeling even worse because so-and-so is upset. And that's that cascade effect, especially when it comes to family, right? Because if you have 3 generations or 2 generations living in one household, you cannot avoid them. They're there with you. So if you guys are all upset, then everyone's upset. Joining a local support group or attending programs to meet others with your condition. I've had many patients say that they've actually really missed during the pandemic having these dinner programs and having these support groups where they can go and talk to other people. Not necessarily, and they admitted, I don't want to switch medication, I don't want to switch my treatment, I've been doing well, but they just felt like, I want to meet other people that have my condition. I don't know anyone else around my age group, perhaps, or maybe someone else around my situation. Maybe they don't know anyone that has used a walker or used a cane, and they're not sure if they feel comfortable with the whole scenario, and maybe having someone else that they can talk to would help. Again, these are all things that not all inclusive, but things that you should consider and see how you can incorporate these into your daily lives and your conversations. What I will say, one caveat with the local support groups and the programs is, perhaps initially you did not feel inclined, or maybe your provider said, hey, why don't you wait on that for a little bit? Because when you are newly diagnosed, there's a lot of things going through your head. And when you see other people, perhaps in other situations that unfortunately apply to them, but not necessarily apply to you. An example, someone in a wheelchair, that's the first thing that's going to come to you, and you're going to feel not so well about it. It's going to bring your energy levels down. And so those are things that you want to keep in mind. And if one support group doesn't work for you, then you don't have to go back. You can find another, or maybe create your own. And the same thing with the specialist. So when you're seeing a provider, you have to have that chemistry, that click. And don't be afraid with a mental health counselor or a specialist. If you don't have that conversation, that chemistry, that you're like, I'm not sure that this is the right person for me, no harm, no foul. Find someone else. The most important thing is that you feel comfortable with that person having conversation, and that they can be there to support you throughout your time.